Okay, so welcome everybody, wherever you are in the world, to this panel on the human side of innovation, brought to you by Women in Innovation, a joint initiative between Women Who Lead, which is a coaching and leadership development program I co-founded several years ago, and ISPIM Innovation. And jointly, we've actually run a number of different types of sessions. This year, we have done a number of webinar series. We also did a conference for International Women's Day, and we are doing a number of one-on-one interviews as well with a variety of women who are in leadership and management roles and who are passionate about leading and driving innovation. So if this is a subject of interest to you, which hopefully it is, seeing as you're here, and you'd love to be featured, then please do get in touch. You can put in the chat that you're interested, and I'll also put my, my email address later on, and I'll be happy to get back in touch with you. So my name is Natalie Turner. I am the author of the award-winning book, Yes, You Can Innovate, and inventor of the 6 I's of Innovation, which is a people and a purpose-centered methodology that really brings purpose to the heart of why we are innovating. And it combines design thinking with organizational development and has an assessment tool for individuals and for teams to help us individually and collectively understand how we can contribute our skills to making more innovation more impactful and more purposeful. So today, joining me in this conversation, which I am sure is going to be very juicy and very, very interesting. And it's all really about the purpose of values and sustainability and how important it is that purpose is central to the innovations that we are now creating in this world. We have Sandra, who's co-founder of Women in Innovation, and she's from ISPIM Innovation. We have Bettina, who's founder of the Innovation Leadership Forum and a prolific author and speaker in the field of innovation. Monica, who's a true purpose coach, and Desi, who's a director at IHS Markit. So all of them are going to introduce themselves to you in a moment. So welcome, ladies. I'll just formally welcome you now, but we'll hear from each of you in a moment. So after they have introduced themselves, we're going to have a round of questions for the panelists and a number of rounds. And please feel free to write in the chat any questions that you've got as we go through. We will come to these at the end and we'll leave some time to answer your questions. But when you write in the chat, please say who you are, where you're zooming in from, and who you would like to direct your question to. And as we're all in this Zoom room together, feel free to put on your camera if you want to. This is the human side of innovation after all. And if you want to have it in speaker view so that you can see each of the panelists on a bigger screen, then feel free to do that as well. So before we begin then, in terms of hearing from our panelists, why women in innovation, and why and what is the human side of innovation? So firstly, whilst our desire is to inspire and to infuse both genders to be more purposeful in how they are leading innovation, we really want to promote diversity of opinion and of thought into this domain of innovation leadership, and really encourage more women to step up and step into leadership and into management of innovation, whether it's a formal role or title or not within their organizations. And secondly, we firmly believe that, especially during this time of huge upheaval and change, that our ability to innovate, to create value out of new ideas, is the survival skill of our time. And so we need to be leading out of purpose for people, for planet, and for performance, and to have sustainability at the heart. And this is the subject that's very, very close to myself and also to all of the panelists. And it's great, I believe, that to have more women in leadership to really help us on this journey, to have more female voices. So we are going to be exploring these very juicy subjects of really looking at values of purpose and of sustainability and of people through this webinar. And each of the panelists is going to bring their unique flavor to this subject around leading innovation. So on that note, let me open up the virtual floor to our wonderful guests today and ask them to introduce themselves to you before we kick off with the round of questions. So let's start with you, Sandra, first. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as it relates to your career in leading and in managing innovation and working with corporates, and something maybe that you're passionate about right at this time?
Definitely. Thank you, Natalie, for the great introduction. Yeah, so I'm Sandra. I work at a company called ISPIM Innovation. We do software and consulting for innovation management. And as Natalie said, we work with big corporates, NGOs, but we've also done, different aspects where last year, for example, we ran a hackathon in the country of Togo in West Africa to help with the consequences of COVID-19. So it's a very diverse job, and I'm here as the head of sustainability. That means I help our clients innovate for people and for planet, not just for profit. It's a very fulfilling role that I am very passionate about, because I believe strongly that innovation is something that is really, really important, but you got to innovate for the right things. So you have to keep people and planet in mind. That's what I really care about. And yeah, I was really happy to co-found Women in Innovation with you, Natalie. It's been a really great journey, and I'm super happy that you guys are on it with us now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. So Monica, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm calling in from Berlin. As Natalie said, I am a purpose consultant and purpose guide, or true purpose guide. And I help leaders, organizations, and anyone who's out to finding their higher purpose. I have been, in a successful career in human resources as an organizational development specialist, and also very focused on corporate cultures. And a few years back, I did exactly that. I found my own, or I discovered and articulated my own purpose, and decided that this is the calling for now, and that I'm here to help leaders and organizations finding their purpose. I think that, for me, it's really a cornerstone, and we'll talk a little bit more later, that, innovation or anything that we do in this world needs to be anchored at something that we really, truly know we believe in. And I think for me, purpose is at the center of that. And I couldn't be happier than doing what I do, because I love every day of my new life. And yeah, I'm really glad. And I met Natalie many years ago, and her 6 I's approach with purpose in the center is just fabulous. So let's talk about it later.
Great, thank you, Monica. And Desi.
Hi, Natalie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I'm calling in from Singapore. I'm a lawyer by training of 20 years plus. And I've also added to my portfolio just about a year ago the role of Global Chief Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Officer for IHS Markit, reporting into our CEO. I've been with the company 12 years, 5 years in London, 7 years in Singapore, operating across Asia Pacific and globally. So really happy to be part of this discussion. IHS Markit, our purpose is providing critical insights to our customers so that they can drive the markets and communities in which they operate. So really getting behind that as a company-wide purpose. We'll be able to touch on how we've done that as we go through the questions.
Fabulous. Thank you, Desi. And Bettina.
Yes, thank you very much, Natalie. It's my absolute pleasure to join this panel of amazing women. I'm honored to be part of it. And I started my professional life out as a and with a degree in architecture and town planning, which was a compromise gone wrong between computer science and fashion design. And the big lesson I took out from that one is, if something is truly important in your life, don't compromise. You know, I think one of the things that's much more required, and I think which I certainly didn't have for a long time, and I'm sometimes still not quite sure how patient I am. But you know, if you're trying to figure out where you want to go, patient and giving it space and allowing it to merge is much more important than charging ahead. Even though, you know, I think experimentation is fantastic, but you know, if you want to commit, really make sure that it's actually that you are passionate about. I think we're spending too much time with our jobs to do something that we're not passionate about. And into innovation, I somewhat stumbled into it. I did an MBA and later my PhD at London Business School, and I still remember when I had my entry interview, or possible entry interview with a member of faculty, and they asked me what I wanted to do after finishing my MBA. I just said, you know, I really haven't got a clue. I'm going to be learning so many new things. How can I possibly say what I want to do afterwards? So, you know, I don't think my journey has been choreographed or planned at any stage. It's more sort of being open for what's coming my way. And so I've been on the path of understanding and enabling innovation, as I always describe it, for almost 30 years. And I love nothing more than infecting others with my passion for innovation, whether it is, you know, through workshops or teaching or public speaking or writing or research, whatever it is. You know, as long as I can spread the innovation virus, I'm very happy. And what I love most about innovation is that I really, really believe that absolutely everyone has a role to play in innovation. And it's not just the crazy people with the crazy ideas, but unless we have people who can ground that crazy idea and make it happen, it will be a crazy idea and not innovation. And I think sort of there's a lack of awareness of this fact that everyone, absolutely everyone, and I truly believe that, has a role to play in innovation. And that is one of the reasons why I too am a great fan of Natalie's model, which makes that very clear, that everyone with their different skill sets can make a contribution, has to make a contribution if we want innovation to work. And yeah, one of the other things I realized on the journey or what I love about the journey, it enabled me to tap into all sorts of different topics: leadership, diversity, collaboration, you name it. So it constantly requires me to expand my horizon. And I've also realized that there is a dark side to innovation. And maybe that's the excuse that I have, that half of me is in the shadow, maybe to reflect that side a little bit.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bettina. So welcome, ladies. It's fantastic to hear from each of you. And just to let all the panelists know too, that I'm actually zooming in from the beautiful island of Penang in northwestern Malaysia. So just up the road from Desi in Singapore, but quite a long way from Berlin and from Europe. So it's our early evening here. Okay, great. So let us kick off then with our first round of questions for our panelists. And as I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will come back to them at the end of the session to address them then. But if something is top of mind to you as we're going through, then please, please do feel free to write your questions in the chat. Okay, let's start with you then, Sandra. A pertinent question for our time, given the time we're all living in collectively right now. What are the trends as you see them that have really come up through COVID-19? And why do you think companies are focusing more on people engagement to innovate in ways of working? So really that's sort of the focus on people that has shifted and has changed in the last 12, 13, 14, 15 months or so. So Sandra, over to you.
Yeah, good question, Natalie. Basically what you can kind of imagine is that some years ago, we used to see business separately from our natural environment and from the people in it. But what we've seen now with the pandemic, and I think what also companies have seen, or what I see with our clients, is that they're actually very, very connected, right? So companies can only work in societies that are healthy and that work. That is what the pandemic is really illustrating here. And the environment influences these societies. So if a virus like COVID is spread through natural influences, it affects these societies and affects companies. So that's kind of like what we've seen there. So I'm seeing a lot more sustainability initiatives on the ecological side. I think this is also a trend that was started before COVID, but is now really being accelerated more, thankfully, because it's very, very necessary and about time that that should happen. But also just this focus on people, because employers have, it's been very illustrated that if your employees are not healthy, then your company is literally worth nothing because you can't do anything. So you have to focus on people. You have to keep them healthy, and that includes physical health, but also mentally healthy, right? So what I've seen with a lot of our clients is that many initiatives were started through their innovation platforms that Hype provides, but where it wasn't about what should our next product be or next service or something like that, what we usually tend to see a lot, but it was more like, how can we create a safe workspace for you? And that includes safety of workers who have to come in, for example, in production facilities to make sure that they're being healthy. But it also includes mental health when somebody's working from home and they're all alone all day long. That does something to you. Or also when you have to do homeschooling and you're juggling your kids and your job and everything is not working the way that you think it's supposed to work. What can your employer do? So we've seen a lot of these initiatives around that, where companies are innovating with and for their employees, not necessarily just for profit, because they know that if they don't provide that kind of assistance, then they won't be successful. So it's not just innovation for these employees, but it's actively, collaboratively involving them. And that includes initiatives like, we have a client who's doing, things around respect. How can we create a respectful work environment? How can we work towards that? Or also, how can we give back to our communities, but not in the way of how can we donate a lot of money at once, but how can we actually work with them to also make more money? So how can we donate continuously, but then have them buy more of our products? So really that circle of giving, but then also gaining and sustaining that whole business. So it's been really interesting where companies have been moving, but the focus was very, very clearly on people. And I hope that it really continues that way.
Yeah, absolutely, Sandra. Like you, it's interesting, isn't it? With the purpose, talking about purpose-centered innovation as well. It has, up until sort of, COVID coming into the world, it was very much on the fringe, wasn't it? The sort of the people and the purpose-centeredness. But there's been this acceleration, and good to see that. Sad it had to take COVID to make that happen. But there is this acceleration now where there's a lot more discussion, and it's not just on the fringes now. There's a lot more engagement around how do we engage people? How do we bring them in to understand that innovation is far more than just about product, that it is all around processes, ways of working, ways of doing things. So it's fantastic to hear that you're seeing that and you're enabling that in your role at Hype Innovation as well. So that's brilliant. Okay, so Bettina, let's move to you then. I know that focus on people is one of the 3 pillars of your thinking and your approach to innovation. And I've known you for a number of years, and you've always been centered on humans, on people, and our impact. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I'll gladly do that. First of all, I'd just like to quickly connect to what Sandra's just said. And I'm very, 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 very curious to see whether what you are describing will be visible in the annual engagement surveys, because at the moment we know that only about 30% of people in organizations are positively engaged. The rest are either neutral or even destructive in the company context. So I'm very, very curious to see, what the next years of those surveys will actually bring. But yes, Natalie, absolutely, indeed, while it is certainly a very, very strong focus and has been for a long time, it was not always the case. So when I started my journey, as I said, quite some time ago, I would go into an organization to ask to look at the processes in order to understand why innovation did or didn't happen. And today I'm much more interested in psychology and neuroscience. It's basically, it's really how do we as people work? What is our operating system? What in our operating system enables us to engage with change and innovation, and what prevents us from doing that? And so how did I get there? I think it started really when I asked to look at projects that did not go quite as expected as I described it. So I didn't say, I want a project that's gone wrong, because people are very embarrassed to share these kinds of things. So I just asked for something that didn't go as expected, and observed a number of things. So while people have been asked to work in teams for a long time, I felt there was a distinct lack of understanding the challenges of diversity, because you need a lot of diversity in order to innovate, right? So we need people with a big picture and the detailed focus and so on and so forth. Yet the challenge is that these people tend to speak different languages, and they have a different mindset. Different things are important to them. They've got certain filters that allow certain things to come through and filter out others. And the consequence of that is that in highly diverse teams, it's very easy to have mistrust, misunderstanding, and misgivings. And not least of all, it affects the trust and respect in these teams. And I strongly believe unless there is trust and respect, people will neither be willing to share their crazy ideas, nor will they be willing to listen to those of others. So what I felt was really is if we understand the diversity and the clashes and the problems, then that will really give us a lever to improve how innovation can or cannot happen. And the second thing that I also realized that this, yes, people are asked to work in teams, but there's a lack of alignment of what people are expected to do, i.e. work in teams, and the way that they are remunerated and rewarded, which is generally based on their individual performance. And so by delivering what they're expected to deliver in the innovation context, i.e. collaborate, they had to sacrifice themselves in a certain way. And I just, again, you need to understand people. We tend to deliver what we are rewarded for. And, we have to be very altruistic to do something else. So that was another aspect that I thought you need to understand people if you want to improve conditions for innovation. And then probably the final one is that all of us make assumptions, and all of us have habits. And that again is sort of really gets in the way of innovation. But there's a good reason that we're having habits and that we are making assumptions, because our brain likes to organize things in boxes. So that when we are coming into a new situation, we don't have to think, what is this? And our brain doesn't need to spend a lot of energy analyzing and understanding. It can just get into the box and say, oh, I know how to deal with one of those. But of course, in the context of innovation, that's a huge challenge, because then we sometimes neglect to see where this thing that we are trying to achieve is different from what we know. And we are trying to apply things that have worked in the past, rather than figuring out on, this new thing needs to be actually tackled. So, I think this is, these insights made me realize just how important it is to really understand people, to really focus on people. And, as I said, to understand the human operating system so that we can work with it and, create better awareness of the beauty of diversity that then allows the trust and respect to build that we actually need if we want to innovate successfully.
I love that, Bettina. I know when I left corporate back in 2006 and set up my own innovation company, it was one of the big things that I was looking for at that time as well. There were so many different types of models out there, but they were very engineering driven or R&D driven or new product development. But what about other people, that work in different areas of organizations, and how we need different types of ways of thinking to engage process innovation, service innovation, ways of working, and the different types of people and how they can contribute their skills and realize that they are innovators. It's not just the igniters that are out there or those that come up with the idea, but people who drive those ideas into the world are just as important to make innovation happen and move beyond being just about creativity. So it's great, being on this journey with you, Bettina, over the years, and really, working together on that. So thank you. And Monica, so let's sort of, you are very much centered in understanding purpose, and you've transitioned to setting up your own organization. So how does defining an organization or a leader's purpose link to being more innovative and on creating more innovative outcomes, which is, what we're all really interested in seeing more of: innovation that's purposeful for people, for performance and planet. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, glad to. I mean, when I thought about the question, I had immediately 3 points in mind, and I'll get to them. But let me set the stage first, because I think it's my experience, and of course there's lots of many very smart books written about change, but also innovation, that I think there's only 2 real energies that make us change/innovate. And one is, either there is a need, we're kind of like a threat or something that makes us need to move from where we are now. And that goes for leaders, for individuals, as well as organizations, I think. And the other thing is, you're motivated, and you aspire, or Bettina said, you have the passion, you have the drive to do something differently. And for me, without fail, purpose feeds the latter, the drive, the passion, the aspiration. I think, and I lean myself out of the window. I think innovation that comes from threat could be good, but is not always good. But innovation that comes from passion and aspiration cannot be anything but good. So I think that's my experience with purpose. When I work with leaders, either on their own leadership purpose, but also the organization's purpose, there are 3 things we look at. So one is, what's your essence? What's your core? What is it in you as a leader and or organization that you're uniquely equipped to do? The second thing we look at is, what are some of the powers, your superpowers, that you bring into this world over and over? And you can do this with, again, an individual and look back at their life. What have they always been good at? And the same goes for organizations. And the third is, what's your mission? What is the and this is probably the why question, right? Why are you doing what you're doing? What do you want to change? What do you aspire to do differently? And I think this is where the motor of passion and innovation really comes from. And so, I think, Bettina, I loved what you said, don't compromise. And I think this goes so much for purpose, right? I think when an organization really digs deep, and not into a marketing purpose, not something that looks good and is flashy, but something that they truly, truly believe in and they want to do, then innovation is a no-brainer. It just happens, right? Because I think it gives you the motivation to drive and innovate. It focuses you in the direction that you want to go, because you don't have to look outside when you have purpose and you're connected to it. You're looking inside, and it gives you the answers, rather than having to, do the same thing as your competitors, or do the things that you see out there. You can connect it to what you see out there, but it stems from within you as a leader or an organization. And and you also create the longevity and energy that is needed for innovation, because I think when you change, when you do something, there's failure. It's going to happen, right? So purpose is really what gives you the courage and the energy and the passion to keep going, even if it goes hard. So for me, and you can hear, I think, I don't know how you can innovate without having a clear purpose. And the last thing I say is, in my experience with my clients, there is no purpose that does not feed something that is good for humanity. So I have never heard a purpose in an organization or an individual that would not help our planet, help our people in any way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Monica. That's fantastic. And I know when I worked with you personally, and you were my purpose guide, my purpose coach, just what a powerful journey that was, to go deep into your inner drivers, because that's what motivates. That's really the motor, the engine of our self, really, depending on where we may put that energy, but knowing what it is. And I can remember with you, it was all around, to inspire courageous action so that people will create new ideas that will have an impact on people, performance, and planet. And that's very much my core purpose. Everything I do, I guide along that line, and that's like the sort of the golden thread of consciousness, or the red thread that, you know, when I look over my life. And the work that we did together was really, really important in you know, pulling that out. So it's fantastic to hear, you know, how you articulate this. So thank you. Thanks, Moni. All right, so Desi, let's hear from you, the corporate view. You head up diversity and inclusion at IHS Markit. How do you think this impacts how you innovate and lead more purpose-driven innovation?
So let me kind of set the scene. No one will be surprised, and it won't be unique to IHS Markit. Innovation is one of our core values. But to set the scene, IHS Markit was a company born out of a startup. And we started life in a barn just outside of London with 10 employees in 2003. And today, at this stage of our chapter, we're about to merge at a valuation of 40 billion and become the world's largest information service provider. So this kind of growth and success has absolutely relied on fostering a global workplace environment, which gives the ability of colleagues to create new ways of doing things, to challenge the status quo and think of new ways to solve existing problems, as the markets and our customers have rapidly evolved in that 17 plus years. Customers who themselves, both at entity level and individual level, come from diverse backgrounds. So experience for our company and research has shown us that diverse groups in the labor market enrich that effort to create the kind of innovation and technological advancement that we've enjoyed, that is now, you know, bearing testimony in the success of the company. And that innovation came and continues to come from people doing work for us, using what they know. And so when you have people from diverse backgrounds, cultures, they innovate using those diverse perspectives. So I just wanted to kind of summarize that, because for us, diversity is absolutely key to that core value of innovation. It doesn't stop there, right? We know that innovation is not just ideation, but critically, if not more importantly, it's execution. Arguably, that's more important. You can have many, many great ideas. If you can't execute and bring them to market, mastering effective communication skills, project management, change management, team delivery, then you may not get there at all, or if you may get there with a lot of inefficiency that hits the top line and the bottom line. So for us, as well as diversity, what we've placed a lot of focus on is inclusion. So in terms of the how, we've codified our approach to D&I around a mission for our company to be an environment which values and fosters the ability of each high-performance colleague to be able to bring their authentic self to IHS Markit. I like the way Monica put it, to understand, realize their superpowers that are unique to each individual. This is structured formally under 6 pillars: recruitment, learning, retention, communication, partnerships, and affinity groups. That is how my team, as a central DEI support team, looks at the lens of DEI, and how all of our programs, initiatives, and policies that support our people are driving programs and policies to ensure that we attract and retain diverse, high-performance talent, with a real emphasis, and I really want to underline this, on inclusion and intersectionality, recognizing that each and every colleague we have within the company does not fit in one box. And we love that. So if I can mention a few programs, I'm not going to list everything, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, please do so via LinkedIn or Natalie. We have all of our initiatives and programs structured under our 6 pillars, focusing on that attraction of key talent into the company, really cleansing our hiring process to mitigate biases that exist in all of us by using diverse and trained interviewing panels, mitigating bias in our promotion processes through conscious, intentional training and bias observers. As Bettina said, we all bring our assumptions and biases into the way we operate. We understand that, we recognize that. What we really focus on is making sure that people are mindful and intentional in the way that they operate so that they mitigate those assumptions. We have a really great series of reverse mentoring. This is where leadership members of our leadership from MD and above are mentored by junior colleagues in the organization from diverse backgrounds, giving them that personal connection and lens into their individual experiences. We have active bystander and unconscious bias workshops, again, moving away from mandatory compliance-driven trainings to much more collaborative, psychologically safe spaces for people to learn about active bystander and unconscious bias. We have a lot of cross-culture EQ, CQ leadership programs, right? Not only do we look at sort of the gender differences, but we also have a lot of cultural differences amongst us. Even within one location, we have multiple cultures and behaviors that we see showing up. We want people to be mindful of how they operate and how others operate. And last but not least, we've actively invested and supported our affinity groups. I can't emphasize how critical it is, not just to drive a strong top-down DEI people-centered culture that supports innovation, but to support that grassroots that are critical to getting buy-in to the kind of company we want to be. And as Sandra mentioned, we're also putting a lot of focus on well-being. It started last year for obvious reasons. We've chosen to make that central theme to our DEI strategy for 2021 and likely 2022. Recognizing, one, the extremely challenging situation presented by COVID and COVID impact, but two, being mindful of the disproportionately adverse impact that COVID and the challenges that it presents has on certain demographics of our employee population, being very mindful about how we support them through that. So I'll stop speaking there. I've taken up a lot of time, but as I said, if anyone's interested in learning more about those programs and others, I'm happy to share our learning. We're far from perfect. We're definitely on a learning journey, but I'm really proud of what we've been able to achieve so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Desi. Diversity is the lifeblood of innovation, and it's really, really good to hear all those very practical initiatives that you're sponsoring and supporting globally to really make sure that this is central. So really innovating in that sphere of work is fantastic to see. Thank you for that. Okay, so we'll just have a pause now, and you know, we've had these four brilliant answers from our panelists around and explorations of diving into these themes around human-centered innovation, from trends from COVID, from focus on people, defining purpose, the importance of diversity. So if you have any comments or questions, and I can see there are a few coming into the chat, which is fantastic, please do write them in while they're fresh, because we're going to have another round now, and then we'll go through the chat at the end and see what your comments, what your thoughts, what your questions are. So if you've got anything top of mind, please do put it in the chat, and we're going to dive into our next round right now. So Monica, let's start with you this time. Please, can you tell us, from your perspective, from your point of view, how do values play a role in purpose-driven innovation processes? You know, that real focus on, you know, values. So tell us more from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Well, I said that before, and I think, you know, you and I had this conversation. This is why I love what you came up with in terms of your framework, right? Because you look at innovation not as a process, but also more importantly as what are the mindsets and what's the culture that actually feeds innovation. And I think, you know, back to, you know, the purpose is the middle or the center of it and feeds it. I think the next, and so that creates the why, it creates the energy, it creates the ambition. But then the question is, so how do you do it, right? I mean, I think, you know, what kind of environment do you need to create? Desi just so beautifully talked about all of the work they do around diversity and really making this not a program, but something that lives inside. And I think, you know, for me, every innovation needs to, you know, start with purpose. Then it needs to be the question, what are what are the values that we really need as a, what are core to who we are as an organization, but also what of these values do our purpose support, and how does it support it? So, for me, it's like, if you think about the purpose as the heart, the what values are the muscles, the how, right? I mean, it's how you can get movement. And I think, in my work, when I work with organizational clients, it's interesting. Sometimes they want to start with values, and that's fine, right? Because then we go to purpose and we go back to values. But, the real, I think in my mind, the real journey is going from purpose to values, and then to start to think about, how do I innovate? So maybe I'll share an example of one of our clients, or one of my clients in the, it's a solar publisher in the solar space, and of course, in itself, the solar industry is something that one could say is a sustainable, wonderful, sustainable industry. But they also need a lot more traction, right, to get into the market. And, especially with COVID, it was interesting because we did the work just as COVID started with them. And they had done everything, and they had, they came and published in, all of these big, associations. There was in German you say Messe. What is the word for Messe in English? Help me here.
Trade fair.
The trade fairs, thank you. So they had Messe or trade fairs all over the world. That's how they multiplied themselves. And all of a sudden COVID hit, and what can you do? And it just happened that we did the purpose and values journey. So the purpose that they came up with was creating and facilitating trusted conversations on a global platform for a sustainable future. So that's the purpose statement, and lots of work went into this. And as I said, one answer we will find is also, what's their mission? Empowering people to building knowledge and networks to accelerate the clean energy transition. So with that, and with all of that feeds this final articulation, they asked the question: so what are the values that actually support this, and how can we start to innovate? So commitment was one, and that comes from the trusted conversations are really important. So when you create trusted conversations, you need commitment, you need quality. The quality is another, value that they came up with. And of course, innovation, right? Because I think you're here, you want the global platform. It's a small industry still. How do you actually, expand it? Sustainability became, of course, a cornerstone, and is already a cornerstone. And respect for inside as well as external. And from there, it was for them, it's so easy, but it was clear where to go. And within 6 months, they've went from completely trade show based to completely online, and they have more people come to their panels and their online webinars that they've ever had before. They're driven by really creating a trusted online space, because they now have this, and they use the values to actually create this. How do we do it, and why do we do it? So I think it's key that you have clear values in that process.
I love that. And I love how the purpose came first, and then it was like, how do we actually bring this to life? What do we need to value in order for that to happen? And that's sort of that red thread running through. That's fantastic. That's a great example. And to see how they've reinvented themselves and innovated in that process. So thanks, Moni. Okay, so let's move to Desi now, to building on values, being alive in an organization. Can you talk more about how your organization implements its company values to create and maintain a culture which supports innovation and change? How does it move off of the, just out of the annual report and documents into a lived experience? So tell us more.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to talk about this, because I've seen this when we were much smaller, when that company culture, expression of our values and evolution of our values was able to be done in a very agile way, right? We all knew one another, and it was very easy to pivot. And we're now nearly 17,000 people across 100 offices around the world. that connection is much more difficult to achieve. And so I think what we've learned on our journey, Natalie, is the need to define and iterate on your company mission, vision, and your corporate values, right? I think most companies have corporate values. We probably overlap on most of them. You can't really get it wrong, right? If you're choosing things like innovation, partnership, communication, respect, integrity, we've all seen them. You can Google them. The really kind of pivotal move we made was to define the vital behaviors that exemplify our corporate values, but also behavior that shows when we're not behaving in a way that is aligned to our corporate values. And then, so in addition to that, and I'm going to be a typical lawyer, I'm going to really kind of be very specific about this. So we have guidance around great ways to live our corporate values. We have guidance around not so great ways to live our corporate values. And then we have questions to consider so people can actually solicit those behaviors within themselves that leads to innovation, effective communication, a discovery mindset, effective collaboration. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, how do you go about doing that? I think what's been really great at this company is Lance, our CEO's openness to defining and iterating on those core values with employees. So I remember he just kind of pivoted in about 7 years ago after reading Walking the Talk, which is a book, Walking the Talk, Building a Culture for Success by Carolyn Taylor. It looks about corporate cultures within organizations. And he said, you know what, let's review what we are, what we think we are, and what we actually are in terms of the way that we show up and behave. And he did it in a way where he initially got a group of 10, and then for each subsequent follow-up meeting, he asked those 10 colleagues to bring one more colleague within the organization along with them. And by the end of it, we had this huge group and a buzz within the organization. Now, that exercise was great because it built trust, it built collaboration, it built relationships within the firm. But then when we had the end output in terms of revising our corporate value and our vital behaviors, there wasn't a sense of just a top-down push from HQ, but rather a global, widespread, broad adoption and championing of what we'd arrived at. So from my experience, I would always urge others to consider approaching it like that. And then it's a given, right, that you have to then incorporate those corporate values and vital behaviors in the way that you recognize colleagues. I can't remember who mentioned, but you know, people want to be recognized for their effort. So we've codified those corporate values and vital behaviors in our performance assessment, which is quarterly, as well as our promotion criteria, as well as a recognition platform that was innovated by a group of colleagues that were tasked with coming up with a new way to recognize colleagues, where you can give shout outs and give thanks to colleagues that you have worked with or that have worked for you on a particular project or transaction, aligned to one of our corporate values, saying how they showed up in a way that exemplified that corporate value. And just that really small thing has actually meant so much to colleagues around the world around receiving recognition for their efforts and the way that they show up.
Fantastic. Thank you, Desi. So it's all really about lived experience, really translation of values into behaviors, and then a reinforcement of that in ways of working. And it sounds like you've been really innovating in this space as well as diversity and inclusion, you know, to really, you know, make the whole process of what does it mean to live values come to life, and how people are really engaged in that. So that's fantastic. Okay, Bettina, let's hear from you then. This is an interesting subject in itself. I think we could actually have a whole panel on this one, but you know, you talk about this dark side of innovation. Now, how do you define that? What do you mean by that? And why do you think purpose and sustainability is so important in our design principles of what we are creating, what we're bringing into the world?
try again. Thank you very much for that wonderful question, Natalie. Absolutely. I mean, the dark side of innovation is something that I'm also very passionate about, or rather communicating about it, not the dark side itself. And I still remember it was a conference back in 2011, and there were lots of about 200-300 engineers in the room, and there I was on stage, and the title of my talk was "Innovation, Beware of the Dark Side." And so there I was standing up, very nervous about proclaiming this for the first time publicly, that I believe that any innovation without sustainable consideration at its core is irresponsible. That was a very, very sort of uncomfortable moment in a way. And you asked sort of, what do I mean by that? And I think it is absolutely directly and immediately linked to purpose, because I just felt that innovation had become such a buzzword, or I still feel it sometimes is, that everyone, ooh, we must innovate, you know, we need more innovation. Then people run off in all four corners of the world to see what they can innovate. And you just think, yeah, well, what's the purpose of this? You know, what are you trying to achieve? And I find actually it is very interesting if you have conversation with leaders and you ask them, why do you innovate? It really, you know, or very often the immediate response is a very puzzled look on their faces. Like, you know, are we not meant to innovate? Is that not what everyone does? Yes, of course. But why are you innovating? What are you trying to achieve? And so, you know, for me, innovation without a purpose is very, very clearly the dark side of innovation, because it wastes resources, it wastes engagement of people who are just doing stuff without, you know, understanding the meaning and you know, seeing any benefits of it. And I think there are quite a few more, because I think with all this, you know, we must innovate, I think we have too much innovation. I really can go up the wall when I just hear people get really excited about 5G. Right? I just wish 3G or 4G would work properly everywhere. But no, you know, I've just moved to Munich after 31 years in the UK. And on the train journey from London via Cambridge to King's Lynn, outside which I live, I could not have a telephone conversation because the network would collapse in between. And so, you know, we are constantly trying to do the next thing without making sure that whatever we have is embedded first and is working properly first before we then improve on it. Another one is that I think very often innovation is, because in our statement to bring it out into the world, we're releasing it too soon. We don't understand the unintended negative consequences before we release something. And once Pandora's box is open, there is no taking it back. You know, so I think we are too careless, we are too thoughtless, too mindless when we are innovating, particularly when it concerns things that affects human health, that affects, you know, the planet's health, and so on and so on. We're just chucking things out because we are so excited by what can be done, and not asking whether it is actually meaningful and beneficial at a wider perspective. And then finally, another big hobby horse of mine is when good innovation turns bad. And we heard about solar energy from Monica a moment ago, and it drives me absolutely. I mean, solar energy in itself is the symbol for renewable energy, for looking after the planet, for improving. Right, that's my understanding. And yet then again, you know, using my train journey from King's Lynn to London as a point of insight, is then driving down on that train, I see fields that used to be green and had grass growing wildly. I see them covered with solar panels. Everything under it. I think, you know, sometimes I think they use pesticides and whatever to keep the grass underneath the panels grow so the panels can deliver maximum value. And I think, really, I mean, you know, what are you doing? Solar panels are meant to help our planet, not destroy the green areas that we have. And have we not covered enough with concrete and asphalt? Why don't we use the structures that are already there? Cover all roads with solar panels, cover all buildings with solar panels, right? You know, we don't need to take up any more of nature. And the worst examples I've seen is where they cut down forests in order to put down, you know, solar farms. And I just think, you know, that's the dark side of innovation, guys. Just think what you are doing. You know, if you're not putting it into the service of sustainability, you're doing something wrong. And of course, I also know what the challenge is, because if they wanted to put the solar panels on roads or over roads or on buildings, they need to collaborate. And they need to collaborate with people they've never collaborated before. So as you can probably tell, I'm hugely passionate about this dark side and, you know, creating more awareness for it.
Thank you, Bettina. Absolutely. And you know what I'm hearing there really is we need to insert the pause button a lot more in our work, in our lives, in what we're doing, and really stand back, take that critical view of our ideas, be able to use that mindset of really getting to the root of something to understand what the impact will be of our ideas. So it's really, really interesting subject. Thank you, Bettina. And Sandra, our last formal question on the panel before we have a look and see what other things people would like to hear about. Now, if we look, I think in a sense, building really on this whole aspect of values and ecology and sustainability, if we look at the ecological with the human side of innovation, what role do and can women play in particular in accelerating and affecting change in the future? So give us the perspective as a female leader, manager in your organization. You know, what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, and adding to what Bettina just said, it's really, you know, connected. It has a lot to do with collaboration, and if you're working with the right people there. And so basically, just, you know, for a number, we see that if we're just talking about sustainability in the environmental sense, right now, worldwide, about 67% of all those, you know, climate affecting decisions are being made by men. So there's not that much diversity in it as we would need. And but we can also see, sometimes we talk about innovation, you know, and what you were just saying, Bettina, what innovation is really necessary. So if you look at just women's education and women's access to family planning, which are two things that are no innovation at all. If you just spread them out and if you just rolled them out across the entire world and gave girls and women access to that, then you know that we could actually reduce our CO2 emissions by 59.6 gigatons by 2050. So we don't even need to innovate. We just need to do what we already know. We need to be innovative in the aspect of culture. How can we get them there? How can we give them access? But what it entails is educated women tend to have less children, and less children, you know, means that the population is going down. It means that CO2 needs, especially, you know, are going down. It means that the planet can breathe a little bit better. So it is something that, you know, when we're talking about innovation, it's not that innovative in its pure sense, but we need to do it and we need to be able to do that. And then that doesn't even entail what they could do. You know, girls that could study engineering or even just go to elementary school, just have a couple of years in there when they can get that access. We don't even know what their ideas and their impact could be. But what we do know is that traditionally, women take more care of community. They tend to be more collaborative, tend to look more around them and see kind of what happens. And that includes not just women, but diversity altogether. So kind of, Bettina, what you were saying triggers in me. I lived in Boulder in Colorado for 2 years, and they actually innovated with children in their city. And they asked them, what do you want your city to look like? And the result was no big parking structures. It wasn't concrete everywhere. It was, you know, meadows where there could be plants and animals and all of that. It was a creek where you could jump across little rocks. It was all of these things, everything built out of wood, all of these things that was way more inclusive for the entire society and the planet than if we had done a traditional planning. And there's also that book, I don't know if you guys know about that, like the book about from Caroline, it's about invisible women data and how we do research. And it, like, that one on me had such a big impact. It talks about really, you know, what we do if we always take only like a male person as the prototype and we assume that everything works that way. It assumes then that infrastructures in cities, for example, are in a way that works easily for men to commute into the city and back out of it, but not women who are caretakers who jump kind of across different neighborhoods, taking care of kids and relatives and elderly people and doing all these things. And that's also true for the environment. So if we only think about, you know, how can we make more profit out of this? How can we do that? Then is when we build, you know, solar panels and take down forests for it. or we, get rid of the rainforest because we need to have more soy, or stuff like that, is when we don't think in that way of being inclusive with our planet, if I can put it in that way. And these are qualities that I don't want to generalize. I don't like that. But often we see them more in women than in men if we give them the opportunity. But COVID again showed that when it comes down to it, women will step out of their work roles and into their caretaking roles proportionally a lot more than men will do. So it is something where we need to build better structures in our societies, be more inclusive, so that women have that opportunity to, innovate with that purpose, to be a part of that, and have children at the same time without, having to let one of these options go. So, and I think that in addition to that, just as a last sentence, what we saw during our Women in Innovation online event in March is that me as a Western woman, that's one perspective. I live in Germany. There's a lot of things that, are being taken care of for me. German government's very strong in these aspects. But there are women all across the world who do not have these options. So they really have to make these decisions. So it is really something on a global basis where we need to make sure that women can be better integrated for the well-being of everyone, including men, including children, including the planet.
Absolutely. And what a comment to end on in terms of our formal panel. Thank you, Sandra. As we go into the future, we are inventing the future. The future is already here. So fantastic comments there to sort of pull that women in innovation angle in as well. And I'm just starting to have a look at some of the chats that are coming through. And there's one from Lokesh Ventakaswamy, who I think builds on exactly what you're saying in a way around women. So let me read it out, and if you want to comment on this or any other people in the panel, please do. So the comment is, amplifying women in engineering and innovation is a great way to drive innovation. Why are there only a few women inventors today? Even in USPTO, only around 12.5% inventors are women. Is this due to lack of grit, task motivation, or expertise, or not exposed to creativity tools? How to transform this? So from your experience, any things that you think we need to do? And I actually just spoke at a STEM panel actually for women for young girls, actually to encourage them to go more into STEM. So absolutely, this is a big issue. So tell me, Sandra, or any of the other ladies on the panel, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, great question, Lukash. Thank you for that. So I think it's a combination of things. There are not that many role models, and role models tend to be very important. That was one of the reasons why Natalie and I actually chose to found the Women in Innovation Initiative, to create these role models, to show that they are people, that they're approachable, that you can be what they are. So for example, our video series now is not just going to be head of innovation at this company or that, where you're like, well, I'm never going to get to that, as a student. But the next interview, don't spoil it, is going to be an innovation intern, and how she got into that and why she's doing an internship in innovation, because I want to create that access, that you can see, oh, I could be like her. And that's why Hype, for example, also sponsored a hackathon for women in STEM early this year. So I think it's a lot about creating these role models, but then it's also about culture change. So my own sister, she's an engineer. She's really good at math. She really likes it, but she felt for the longest time so uncomfortable in her environment, in a lot, with a lot of sexist comments, and never being taken seriously because she was a young woman. So unless we change that, women who want to go in that and have talents and skills will drop out of it at a certain point, because you can't fight, for the rest of your life. You can, but most of us at a certain point are just like, well, you know what, then I'm going to go into this more easygoing environment where I'm being appreciated, but then the world loses out on their skills. So these are just my 2 cents.
Absolutely. And there's one sort of following on that, it's still on the female theme. So anyone else on the panel like to respond to this? Relating to the previous question, looking at the panelists and the participant list of this, this session, this is still a topic that interests mostly women. Why is that, and what can we do to change it?
I would love to comment on that, if I may, because I think it is always, you know, preaching to the converted, which is a major challenge for any conference on any topic. You know, there's only the people who are passionate about it, who are interested in it, will join in. And so I once had the idea is, when I ran my networking initiative some years ago, I said sort of for the end of year event where we were doing, it was about experience stuff rather than talking about it. And I was inviting the participants, who of course were all imbued in innovation and, you know, were living it and breathing it and passionate about it. I said, bring one person along who does not want to be here. You know, so it is our, I see sometimes sort of as my responsibility, and that's why I said I'm so passionate about infecting others, is, you know, they don't want to come, but they like you. So use that lever to drag them in and bring them along, you know. And so I think that's something that every one of us can do. And I think this is the beauty of friendship and emotional bonds. You know, you do something for people that you really like, even though you might not like what you are doing, but, you know, that's a way of trying to expose them, you know, to a topic they would normally not engage with.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Bettina. There's a question here from Elena, directed to me actually, but please feel free to comment as well. First, thank you for the informative session. You're very welcome. Second, do you agree that idea generation and idea implementation stages of the innovation process require different sets of skills from people and also different supporting tools and resources, as implementation of the creative ideas is no less important than their generation? Which skills and individual level aspects facilitating implementation process do you think are important for a successful innovation? Well, absolutely. This is my life's work, and I believe it's the life's work of Bettina and others here as well. We're all about, you know, really focusing on different skills, different mindsets, different tools, different applications that are required, from the identification of opportunities and trends and things that are changing out there, through to coming up with ideas and solutions, investigating them, investing in those ideas, implementing them and improving them. And that is obviously central to the 6 I's of innovation, which is the model that I have invented, and also central to the book of the Yes, You Can Innovate. That absolutely all of these skills are required for innovation to happen. So I don't know if anyone else has a comment on that, particularly around implementation of creative ideas.
Yes. Well, first of all, I am an implementer. That's one of my strengths. And part of when I went on this innovation journey with you, Natalie, that I thought was so great, and I go back to purpose, is when it's centered around purpose, then there is not this you know, then this way of only looking at the people that are the innovation team or innovation department or the innovation group. All of a sudden becomes everybody's business. And then all of a sudden, I think it opens the door for people to understand, you know what, me implementing it is as important, or maybe even more important, than someone who has a fancy idea in the innovation. And I know I'm a bit facetious, you know, they're needed too, but I think really, really important. And and, you know, not only implementation, but also the improvement. I think, you know, Bettina, you talked about this, right? I mean, too little aspects or time is spent on actually using what we already invented and actually making it better, or you know, and making it useful and spreading the word, you know, across the world. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a comment here from Henning, actually, which I think is quite interesting too. One of the local hosts of this year's ISPIM, who set values-based and sustainable innovation as a focus theme for this year's conference, with a question to the consultants amongst us. And I think, you know, obviously, even if you're consulting internally, this does relate to you as well. There is a long journey from introducing a purpose or entry hall values to becoming a values-driven company that consistently pursues values-based innovation and reliably creates a positive impact. More than isolated initiatives are required. How does the consultant among you, often working on single task force contracts, make sure your clients follow up on the journey? Anyone would like to take that? I have my views, but I'll open it up to you in the panel.
Well, I'll say my little bit and then I'll let you, because I think that's something that I've already learning, you know, in my new journey. I think, you know, well, again, you know, it all depends on, you know, the drive within the organization, and it needs to start with the leadership, you know, at least in a traditional organization, right? I mean, not maybe self-directed. There is a little bit of different, you know, motors, but I think, you know, yes, as a consultant, I go back every year and I check in and I say hello, but, you know, unless it's really in the leader's, you know, interest and aspiration to do this, it is going to be not only a long road, but probably also a very short road, actually. I mean, because I think that's the biggest. So I no real answer here for you, Henning, but only to say, yes, it definitely starts with getting the leaders on this path for real.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm doing a number of projects at the moment where, and when I see real success in this area, it's when you have top down and bottom up approaches working in tandem with very good systems to support it. And, you know, when you're looking at governance and you're looking at proper innovation management and you're looking at empowering people on the everyday innovation as well as innovation projects, over a period of time, you start to see more systemic change. Otherwise, you're right, you just end up with these sort of isolated little points of a journey, which can be powerful, but can also enthuse people, but also, you know, actually make people feel a little bit sort of frustrated if they're not seeing bigger impact. Okay, I'm aware of our time. It's nearly half past the hour. Any last comments before I let you all go, ladies? Thank you so much for being on the panels. Brilliant to hear your views, and thank you for, you know, all your pearls of wisdom. But any last comments before we go?
Natalie, I was just going to add to that last question. You know, we suffer from it internally as a large company as well. It's great having lots of people innovating, but you can easily create silos and product-based approach rather than solutioning. So one thing I would say very quickly, we always try to put ourselves in the position of the customer. What is the customer's perspective? What is the customer's journey? What is the customer's environment, rather than us looking out into the world from our company? And I think that really, really helps. I would just mention, I think Sandra mentioned Invisible Women. I can't recommend this book enough. Take it one step further. I take Lokesh's comment on board. You're absolutely right. Maybe it was remiss of us not to have men on this panel, but this is a great way to bring men along on the journey. Take Invisible Women, get a book club within your organization of men and women and discuss it, discuss key themes, really have that conversation. You know, we're a data-driven company. People really want those insights. So I just wanted to kind of second Sandra's recommendation there. And thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. And if you want to put your email address in, panelists, if anyone wants to reach out, I've just put mine in there. Thank you just for the other comments. Lokesh, the best way to get a good idea is to have lots of them, by Linus Pauling. Thank you, Elena. Definitely read the book, Natalie. It's very interesting for my research. Thank you, Monica. I'm studying particularly implementation. Great insights. And Henning, thanks for the answers. Thanks very much for the inspiring session. And there's obviously lots more sessions for people to join. So on that note, then, we're just hitting half past. So I will say thank you again to everybody. And please, you know, reach out to us if you want to know more, particularly around women in innovation initiatives and driving innovation and people-centered innovation. Please do keep in touch, reach out on LinkedIn, and have a great rest of your day. And thank you, ladies, for being on the panel.